NC pork, good for the plate, great for the state.
The North Carolina Sports Network presents This Was Then. Exploring North Carolina's rich sports history with Tim Peeler and Todd McGee. Presented by NC Pork. Good for the plate, great for the state. Episode 2, Frank TURSI. A visit with the author of Tar Heel Boys of Summer, North Carolina's Major League Baseball players.
Welcome to This Was Then on the North Carolina Sports Network. I'm Todd McGee, and along with Tim Peeler, we're going to go in-depth on baseball history in the state of North Carolina with our guest, Frank TURSI.
Frank, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time just because there are few people who understand fully how important baseball has been to the state of North Carolina. And part of that is producing players that go on to play from here in college baseball, in the minor leagues, and in the major leagues. The list I have has about 510 Major League Baseball players who were born in the state of North Carolina, and about 250, maybe 260 who are buried in the state of North Carolina. So that means people have gone from here, done other things, but also come here. Right. Why don't you talk a little bit about what inspired you? You've got a book coming out that will talk about the history of North Carolina baseball players, and just tell us what inspired you to pursue that.
Yeah, it was an idea that was kicking around in my head for probably a decade. And then I retired about 7 years ago, and then COVID hit, and we were isolated, and I figured it was a good time, and so I started. And a lot of my research I'm an old sports writer, and a lot of my research is taken directly from the sports pages of when these players played. I read, scanned thousands of sports pages from all over the country. It's a project that took 3 years, and it becomes, and so the book will actually, all 501. There are some, the 510. There are some, and that's about the right number, 8 or 9 that were once considered as being from North Carolina are, for a reason or another, there were errors made in birth records, but anyway, it's about 501, and they'll all be featured in the book. I'm going to have summaries of every player. 34 will be featured in profiles, and I chose those, the Hall of Famers. You can't ignore the seven Hall of Famers that the state produced, but also some are just very good stories. Just and I think when you take it collectively. Look at those profiles collectively, a picture starts to emerge of a very rural state. Most of these players are from the 20th century, from the early to mid 20th century. It's a very rural state. Textile mills dotted every small community. Many of these players came from those industrial leagues that grew around the textile mills. They were very competitive. And they were the highlight of the mill workers week. It was going to the ballpark. It was free. It was a place where they could gather safely and gossip without a foreman watching everything they did. And many of our ball players graduated from those leagues, or they came from dairy farms and tobacco farms and shop merchants, and so it starts to paint a picture of a North Carolina that is now predominantly gone, and so as someone who not only enjoys baseball but who has written a lot about North Carolina history during my time as a journalist, it was a project that really blended two of my passions. So it was a good way to spend the COVID lockdown.
I always like to say that, up north, out west, other places, in the manufacturing plants, you got together and formed a union. In North Carolina, South Carolina, some of the southern states, you got together and formed a baseball team.
There you go. That's right. That's right.
So, Frank, how important was baseball in the early part of the 20th century to North Carolina in particular?
I mean, it truly was America's game. I mean, it was America's pastime. There was no doubt about it. In North Carolina, you had college basketball that it still was not the game that it would become. College baseball was indeed avidly followed, but there were no professional sports to speak of, and so, I mean, baseball reached into every schoolyard, every hamlet, not only in North Carolina but in America. And if you had, and that's what kids did. They went to high school. They played many of the players that I researched and are in the book. They would play both basketball. Some would play three sports, the three major team sports, but basketball and baseball. But they all knew that if they're going to make money at a team sport, it would have to be baseball. Yeah, it was extremely important, and it tied together the country with the city. There are many stories in the book about, these kids who live 5 miles from town, get on their bike, and ride three days a week into town to play for the American Legion team or one of the youth teams. American Legion baseball was very big in North Carolina. The state produced a number of national title winners. So this was all a breeding ground. And plus, there were minor league teams everywhere. Every little community, Wilson Bugs, and every little community had a minor league team. And this was back in the days when they were graded all the way down to Class D. So you had from Class D, and the highest was double A. There wasn't a triple A yet, but it went from D to double A. And even if you didn't have the talent to make the majors, you could make a pretty good living playing minor league baseball, supplementing it with something else in the off seasons. And a lot of players did that. So yeah, it was extremely important and it mirrored the development of North Carolina, really. But we weren't alone. Most states were like that. I mean, there was a time, and a lot of young people don't understand. They stand that there really was a time when baseball was America's pastime.
It was all consuming. It dates back in North Carolina to the Civil War. Actually,
Correct.
The very first rendering of baseball in art was a painting that happened on the federal prison in Salisbury.
Salisbury, correct. Yep.
Which I worked in Salisbury for a few years, which was one of the great hotbeds of Legion baseball, the Rowan County team of Salisbury, the Rocots.
Yep.
I also grew up going to Cherryville Legion games, post 100, covered some games down in Whiteville, the Legion teams. People don't understand, because travel baseball has subsumed the sport, that Legion baseball was the way to make a name for yourself.
Yes.
It's sad that Legion baseball is not here anymore. My son played Legion baseball growing up here in Cary, and it's a sad loss. But we're getting away from the topic. I just want you to talk about some of your favorite players from the state of North Carolina based on your research. Todd, I think you got some of your favorite players, and I'd like to talk about some of mine just to show you the diversity of the backgrounds of North Carolina players and how they became famous in Major League Baseball.
I mean, one of my favorites is, and it's probably someone you guys never heard of. Certainly, I didn't hear of him until I started researching this book. Was a guy named Gus Britton. Gus was from down in Wilmington, and he was a brawler. I mean, the picture of old time baseball, the baseball that certainly doesn't exist anymore. We had, gamblers in the grandstands, and it wasn't a game that women were encouraged to attend this, and because it was considered rowdy. The players were rowdy. Many of them drank too much. And that led to all kinds of mischief on the field. And it was a time when, you weren't afraid to slide into second with your spikes high, or throw at batters, and it was an expected outcome of the game. And so here comes. I'm going to call up my notes because I want to make sure I get all the dates right. Gus, as I said, he was from Wilmington. He played very shortly for the Cincinnati Reds in 1937. As I said, he had a long minor league career that was full of suspensions, fines for fisticuffs, and well, it turned out that he was playing for the Durham Bulls, and the Bulls were trying to get rid of him because um, he was just a troublemaker. He was just, but Charlie Dressen, who was the manager of the Reds, and himself a pretty combative fella, thought his players were being taken advantage of by opposing pitchers who he thought were throwing at them too much. So he signed Gus as his enforcer. He was the third string catcher. Called him the fighting bullpen catcher, and that's what he was known as during his brief major league career. Well, Gus got into a handful of games for the Reds and one fight, but it so happened to be with Paul Derringer, who was the Reds' ace and himself a pretty mean fella. Well, they got in a scuffle in the Reds. No one knows what led to it, but it started in the Reds dugout. Derringer picked up the catcher's mask and beat Gus over the head with it a few times, but that didn't faze Gus. It took the team to separate them, and the next day, Dressen let his fighting bullpen catcher go. Well, Gus ends up back home in Wilmington, managing. He was player manager for the team there, and they were playing. I think it was Kinston. Let me make sure. Clinton. They were playing the team from Clinton that was managed by Van Lingo Mungo, a Dodgers star during the years when the Dodgers were terrible. But Van was a pretty good pitcher, and he was a fan favorite in Brooklyn. Well, Van's managing the Clinton team, and there was a play at second base that Gus didn't like, and a little bit of an argument. Gus was catching. He gets behind home plate. Van also a player manager, gets up to hit. Words were exchanged, and an actual brawl breaks out and a riot. People were jumping out of the stands. Mungo and the second base umpire were sent to the hospital. It was so bad that charges were filed against Gus, and the judge threw him out of baseball. So he is one of two North Carolinians who were thrown out of baseball. He was reinstated a couple of years later, but by then no one wanted to touch him. So he ended his career and opened up a bar in Wrightsville Beach called Shooney's Place, because it was his nickname, and it was there for quite a while. And one of my favorite quotes was one of Gus's teammates was on a train once. Got into a wreck, hit a car, and there was this terrible grinding of metal. And when someone asked the guy what it sounded like, he said it sounded like Gus Britton was under the train. So, but he epitomized a time in baseball that's now gone. And a guy like Gus would never make it again. Yeah, he certainly is one of my favorites. Um, Another is a guy named Charlie Smith. Um, played in the Negro Leagues in the early 1930s. May indeed be the best hitter who ever lived. That's my contention. He
Better than Oscar Charleston?
Oh, absolutely. He had a 401 lifetime batting average. Unfortunately, his career, he died early of cancer. So he only had four full seasons in the Negro Leagues. He was the one pitcher that no one wanted. Jesse Hubble, Satchel Paige. He was the one guy they didn't want to see coming up to the plate. He was mean. He'd spit at the first two pitches that went by, then look at the pitcher and says, "Now you're in trouble, boy." And would line, if you tried to hit him, he was very adept at lining a pitch back to the box. So pitchers didn't try to knock him down. He was by I mean there were several in the research, several pitchers uh, Phil, who consistently said that Charlie was they would face in winter ball, they would face some good white major leaguers, but they all consistently said Charlie was by far the best hitter they ever faced. But his career, he had 1,100 plate appearances, so it's not his claim to greatness rests on a very thin limb. But it's very intriguing to know what would have happened had he not died of cancer at an early age.
Need insurance? Go to a team that's got your back. The Lawson Insurance Group, run by the Lawson brothers, right here in Raleigh. They deliver real service, smart protection, and the kind of trust that's hard to find these days. Find them online by searching Lawson Insurance Group. That's LAWSON, Lawson Insurance Group, and tell them DG sent you. Struggling with clutter, calendar chaos, or nonstop notifications? Let Emily Parks at organizeforsuccess.com help you get organized and take control of your time. She's a North Carolina-based productivity pro who empowers busy people like you to work smarter and stress less. Visit organizeforsuccess.com and schedule your free discovery session today.
One of my favorite guys in just going through the list of North Carolinians, brought together the unlikely intersection of Leo Tolstoy, the 1946 World Series, and the Vance County town of Kittrell. And he only played a couple of years, again, like you say, Negro Leagues, couldn't played a lot of games against club teams and vagabond teams, all those kinds of things. But his name was Warren Peace. And I like him only because of the name. He had six decisions in Negro League baseball, but hundreds of games that he pitched that weren't cataloged. But you got to like somebody named Warren Peace.
There's an interesting aside about Charlie Smith. For years, until very recently, he was thought to have born in South Carolina. But Gary Ashill, who is a renowned historian of the Negro Leagues, came upon ship manifests because, like most Negro leaguers, Smith played winter ball in Cuba or South America in the winter, and you have to get on a boat to do that. It's before airplanes. And you had to sign the manifest, and you had to put where your birthplace was. When he was born in the early part of 1905 or 6, southern states were not required to issue birth certificates for black babies. So there's no official record as to where Smith was born. It was assumed, based on what seems to be erroneous research on an early historian of Negro Leagues, that Smith was born in South Carolina. Well, all these ship manifests that Asheville came across and this was written in his own handwriting, that when he listed birthplace, he listed Hamlet, which is in Richmond County, just a few miles from his suspected birthplace. And it turned out that's where his daddy was from. And Charlie was the first child in a family of seven. So now the feeling is that he was born in Hamlet and then moved to where he certainly grew up. That's where he went to school. He went to college in Columbia. So he certainly grew up in South Carolina, but I think we can now claim him right now, according to the best research, we can claim him as a North Carolinian.
Well, that's still right in the area, not too far away from the Waxhaws, which we're still disputing whether or not Andrew Jackson was born in North or South Carolina. Same kind of thing. It's not too far from there. Todd, who's your favorite North Carolina baseball player that is not a Cincinnati Red?
Wow, that's a tough one, Tim. When I was a kid, I grew up in Clemens, and there was a pitcher there, a former Major League pitcher who lived there, Don Cardwell, who pitched for the Mets and the Cubs, threw a no-hitter for the Cubs. In fact, is the only major leaguer, I believe, to have thrown a no-hitter in the first game for a new team after he was traded. So that's a claim to fame. And then he also had a game. He pitched for the amazing Mets in 1969, and I believe there was a doubleheader where he and Jerry Koosman each won the game 1-0, pitched complete games, which is just completely unheard of now. And each of them drove in the winning run. So again, another part of baseball that is completely unheard of now, pitchers batting and contributing with the bat. So, and I grew up playing Little League baseball against his son, so that was fun. Vinegar Ben Mizell was my congressman for a while. Obviously, we can't claim him as a North Carolina native, but he did retire here.
And he's buried in North Carolina.
Yep. So we can come close to claiming him.
We can come close, yeah.
But before we move on, Frank, I wanted to remind everybody that you're listening to This Was Then with Tim Peeler and Todd McGee on the North Carolina Sports Network.
I've written a lot about former NC State players, and so I have a lot of that knowledge. My dad played Legion baseball and high school baseball against Tony Cloninger, and he always loved to tell the story. Tony owns a record that'll never be broken. The only pitch two grand slams in a game, which he did for Atlanta in 1967, I believe. Hit a third ball with the bases loaded to the warning track and could have had three in the game. Tony was born in Gaston County, from the same area where I'm from. Loved hearing stories about him playing. But my other favorite guy, or one of my favorite guys, is Dick Burris, the only Major League Baseball player born on the Outer Banks. Right. He was both the son of and the son-in-law of the Cape Hatteras lighthouse keeper.
Correct.
And he had one great season during his career, 1925, playing for the Boston Braves, hit .351 and finished ninth in the batting race.
Right. Right.
Definitely one of those stats that you won't hear about anymore.
So Frank,
I think he started with the Athletics in Philadelphia. I think Connie Mack.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah,
yes.
I think Connie Mack signed him. He was. That's right. He is. There's an interesting what's now Oak Ridge Military Academy in Guilford County.
Yep.
It was called Oak Ridge Institute at the time, and it was a incubator of baseball talent. It was known. And Burris, the family moved from Hatteras Island. They moved to Elizabeth City.
Right.
So to give the kids a better schooling system. And in high school, he said that one of his coaches told him, so look, you want to play baseball, you got to go to Oak Ridge. And he ended up at Oak Ridge. And so, the Oak Ridge occupies an important niche in the history of baseball, early baseball in North Carolina, because it produced a number, 8 or 9 major leaguers in a 10 or 12 year period in the opening decades of the 20th century, and Burris was one of them.
Now, Frank, I know we had talked prior to you coming on. I was going to ask you to maybe rank your top 5 North Carolina-born major leaguers, 20th century and earlier.
I think we'd have to choose that 5 from the 7 Hall of Famers. And honestly, I couldn't think of
I have
anyone.
graded baseball cards of all 7 Hall of Famers. It's my passion to collect baseball cards from North Carolina born
Yeah,
baseball players.
I think certainly Buck Leonard is the greatest offensive player. If we discount Charlie Smith and just say Charlie's career was too short to be considered, then I think Buck Leonard, who played on those great Homestead Grays teams that won 9 consecutive pennants. He hit in front of Josh Gibson. They were called the Thunder Twins. Buck was from Rocky Mount, and he was called the Black Lou Gehrig. And Monty Irvin, who was a Negro leaguer who later played in the major leagues, said if Buck were allowed to play in the white leagues, they may be calling Lou Gehrig the Black Buck Leonard. But Buck certainly is, I think, the best defensive player. He's a ferocious line drive hitter. He was flawless at first base. He was the captain. He was a He only had a 10th grade education because that's what the segregated schools of Rocky Mount allowed a black child at that time. At 52, in fact, he went and got his high school degree at age 52. But he was a gentleman by all accounts. He impressed Cum Posey, who was the owner of the Grays, with his demeanor, as well as his ability on the field, and made him captain. So he was a team captain of those great Homestead Gray teams for almost a decade. And so,
The
yeah,
absolute star of Ken Burns'
yes,
baseball series.
yeah, no,
His stories, absolute star of it.
yeah, I think he is by far the best player North Carolina has produced. Um, I'm kind of partial to Luke Appling, old aches and pains. He played his entire career for the Chicago White Sox, an abysmal team. Is one of only 19 or 20 Hall of Famers who never played in a World Series. He was a magician with the bat, fouling off 10, 12, 15 pitches in a row till he can get to the pitch that he can line to a gap. One of the great stories I came across, Comiskey was the owner of the White Sox, a notorious skinflint, who earlier had in earlier teams he didn't even pay for their laundry bills that the players that were required to pay to clean their own uniforms. But he was a terrible skinflint. Luke one time asked whether he could have 7 or 8 balls to sign for a charity event. They were going to then sell the signed balls, and it was during the Depression. And Comiskey said, "No, his balls cost $2 a piece. Yeah, times are tough. If you're going to have to buy them." So he did. That game, they're all day games. That afternoon at Comiskey Park, Luke got up, fouled the first 20 balls off in a row, stepped out of the box towards the owner's box by the dugout and says, "That's $40 and I'm just getting started." So, but he was also a terrible hypochondriac. That's his nickname. But he always played. He broke an ankle sliding into second base once, and it was the only injury that kept him out of an extended part of the season. But he was always in there, though he complained about everything. So yeah, he was born in High Point, but did most of his growing up in Georgia, and I think Georgia claims him. But he was born in High Point.
There was a long time contention, as I'm a member of the North Carolina Sports Ball Hall of Fame, about whether or not Luke Appling should be considered for the North Carolina Sports
Didn't they
Hall of
recently?
Fame.
Didn't just
And so just within the last 3 years, he has been elected and enshrined in the North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame. Had the privilege of sitting beside Luke Appling Jr. For that induction ceremony and heard some of those stories about his dad. And the family couldn't have been happier that he actually was recognized as a North Carolinian,
Right.
because for so long it was not something that was considered when they were doing their voting.
Yeah, and because he was not in he wasn't in North Carolina long, but he was he was born here. On the pitching side of it, I think Jim Hunter, Gaylord Perry has over 300 victories. He's got the most wins. If you go by WAR, wins above replacement, Gaylord tops the list at 90. But that's mostly based on longevity. He was blessed with a rubber right arm, and he pitched over 20 years. If you look at his individual seasons, how he ranks out with seasonal wars, he ranks as good, not great, but good over 20 years equals the Hall of Fame. And so and plus he did cheat his way into the Hall of Fame. He did. And so there's that to consider as well. But so I'll take Catfish. He was a money guy. I mean, for those Oakland A's teams, he was the guy. He was the guy that you wanted on the mound for the big game. Won 20 games 4 years in a row, I think. Once with the Yankees, and his contract in 1974. Yeah, that's what I thought it was. I don't know if you guys remember that. Hunter was the recognized leader of the Oakland A's, that fractious team that won all those World Series. He had a contract with Finley that required that they making $100,000, which made him one of the highest paid players in baseball. But the contract required that Finley put half of the money in an annuity, which Finley didn't do because he was a cheapskate and didn't want to pay the taxes on it. So after the 74 season, Hunter, along with the Baseball Players Association, which was just getting started, it was in its formative years, filed a grievance, which the contract, which had been between the players and the owners, which had been signed the previous year, required that an arbiter settle such disputes. The arbiter ruled in favor of Hunter and declared him a free agent. And the feeding frenzy began. It went on through most of December of 1974. Hunter was, I interviewed Hunter afterwards. He was making a trip from his home in Hertford to Ahoskie, where his lawyer was, every day. He was missing the hunting season, the deer hunting season, and it was, the contract. No, the numbers had gotten ridiculous. I mean, what was then considered ridiculous. They were going up $100,000 a day. And Hunter told his wife on December 31st, New Year's Eve, said, "I'm signing today. I'm done with this." So he drives back to Hoskie to his lawyer's office, takes a shortcut to the Thunderbird Hotel, where his buddy Clyde Klutz had a room. Klutz was from Lenore, the western part of the state. Had been a catcher in the major leagues, and had become a big time scout. And he originally signed Hunter for the A's. They had become close friends. And Hunter asked him, "What should I do?" At the time, Klutz was a scout for the Yankees. And Clyde says, "What do we got to do to get you to New York?" So over the next 2 hours, the two of them, over a cup of coffee, worked out a deal, called Steinbrenner in New York. Steinbrenner okayed it, $3.4 million, which now a guy like Hunter now, you'd be talking about 20 million a year to
Right.
start. That would be the starting point.
Yes.
This was a 5-year contract at $3.4 million, and it was considered vulgar. I mean, what? And but he showed players what they were worth if they had a choice in the matter, if they could choose where they could play. The reserve clause was still in effect. And then the next year, Andy Messerschmidt and somebody else, who I forget who it was, but two players sued over the reserve clause, and the same arbiter ruled that the reserve clause was illegal, and you can't. So free agency began. But
I
Hunt,
did want to thank you from the very beginning there that you called him Jim Hunter.
yes.
But then you backslid and called him Catfish. He was only Jim Hunter in Hertford.
Right, that's right. And the only reason I call him Catfish is that what most people know him as. But yes,
In
no,
Oakland, that's a Charlie Finley thing. I get it.
Yes.
But in
Yes.
Hertford, it's just Jimmy.
yes, that's right. It was Jimmy. That's exactly right. But yeah, I think he's the best pitcher we produced, with deference to Gaylord Perry and his 300 career victories. His brother Jim Perry was a pretty fine pitcher himself, and my feeling is that Jim Perry had been misused most of his career. I think if he had been used as a starter instead of a spot starter reliever, he only became a regular starter during the last few seasons of his career, and he amassed 100 and over 200 wins. I think if he had been a starter like his brother, I think he'd be in the Hall of Fame. But yeah, because Jim Perry was a very fine pitcher. Those are some of my favorites. Eno Slaughter. I mean, Mr. Hustle. I mean, he was the original Charlie Hustle, and he was branded, unfortunately, when Jackie Robinson broke into the major leagues in '45. There was a very unfortunate, turned out to be erroneous story that ran in the New York Herald Tribune, which said that the Cardinal players, and Enos was a longtime Cardinal, were going to boycott the game when the Dodgers went to St. Louis, and that Enos Slaughter was the ringleader. He always denied it. Teammates always denied it. But Enos then spent the rest of his life trying to prove he wasn't a racist, and it almost certainly delayed his induction in the Hall of Fame by 20 years. And I thought that's a great injustice that was done to him. I mean, all honesty, probably wasn't he was probably a product of his time as far as his relationships with black players. And Robinson did not get a warm welcome in St. Louis. So I'm sure they weren't happy about it, but he certainly was not, by any evidence I could find, a ringleader in some attempt to blackball or boycott Robinson's entry into the league. And he suffered for it, and he always denied it. And, I thought at the end of his life, because I was in the Journal Sports department then, and he would make pilgrimages to sports rooms during Hall of Fame voting time to plead his case, and it was a pretty pathetic figure, I thought. But he was right. I mean, he was branded, and he paid a price that he shouldn't have.
All right, Todd, you can throw a question out after this, but I have one question I want to ask. Which is the greatest feat of pitchers hitting in North Carolina baseball history? Is it A, Wes Farrell hitting more home runs than any pitcher has ever hit or ever will hit again now that pitchers
you're right.
don't
You're
hit?
Right.
39 home runs as a pitcher, or overall 38 as a pitcher. His brother's in the Hall of Fame. He's not, but he went in the North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame before his brother went in.
Right.
All right, that's A. B, Hoyt Wilhelm stepping up to the plate in his first career at bat as a 29-year-old pitcher and hitting a home run and then pitching 1,064 games after that without ever hitting another home run. It was the only one of his career in his first at bat. Or finally, and this is my favorite, not to cloud your vision or anything, but Gaylord Perry, having been told in
That's
1964
my favorite right there. Yes, it is.
that he hit a home run in spring training. Somebody said, "Hey, that kid is going to be a pitcher, but he might hit some home runs for you." And Alvin Dark said, "We'll put a man on the moon before that guy ever hits a home run." On July 28th, 1969, Gaylord's at the plate. They just made the announcement that the Apollo 11 had landed on the moon. He steps up and hits the first of his 7 or 8 career home runs.
Yeah, that's my favorite story as well.
In the locker room afterwards, said, I told you I'd hit a home run."
Yeah, that's my favorite story as well. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, so we were talking about Enos Slaughter, had a great nickname of Country Slaughter.
Country, yeah.
What are some of the other great nicknames of North Carolina-born major league players?
Well, you got Luke Appling's Old Aches and Pains. That's a good one. Moonlight Graham, Archibald Moonlight Graham. Graham appeared in one game for the New York Giants in 1905. Played in the field, never stepped to the plate. And he's one of, forget the number, 43 something non-pitchers who appeared in the field and never had an at-bat, but he's the only one anyone remembers because of the movie Field of Dreams. The story is that novelist W.P. Kinsella had received a baseball almanac, and we remember the days when they used to be baseball's Bible, received the baseball almanac as a Christmas gift, and for some reason, listed in the baseball almanac was this guy named Moonlight Graham. That struck the novelist's eye, and so he included him as a character in a book he wrote about Shoeless Joe Jackson, which later got made into the movie Field of Dreams, and Graham gets played by Burt Lancaster in the movie. I could find no evidence that he was ever called Moonlight while he was alive. He had a long minor league, not very long, but he played in the minor leagues. They called him Doc because he was a doctor. He was going to medical school, and it's one of the reasons why he did not stick with the Giants, because John McGraw would just not have anyone who put something ahead of baseball in his life, and it was important to Graham to get his medical degree. So he put his training first, and that just crossed him off the list as far as McGraw was concerned. So he never made it in the majors. He ended up having a very illustrious career as a town doctor in Chisholm, Minnesota, but no one ever called him Moonlight until he died and the movie came out. And it appeared in one newspaper reference that I could find, and it alluded to his speed, and he was a pretty fast runner. And if you know, he could have made it as a pinch runner, maybe, but I could find no history, no idioms or slangs in which moonlight refers to foot speed. So it's a mystery to me. But from that one reference, a legend has.
Well, certainly one of the more endearing nicknames because of the movie. And
Right.
for those of you, for their viewers, he was born in Fayetteville, and his brother was Frank Porter Graham, who became a senator and was president of UNC, I believe. And Moonlight actually played baseball for UNC and Maryland when he was in medical school.
That's right.
So,
Frank Porter Graham is the person who wanted college athletics to be de-emphasized and disappeared. And the fact that his brother was a college baseball player and a professional baseball player always struck me as funny. That Frank Porter Graham was always so anti-sports. He introduced the Graham rules in the 1930s to de-emphasize it. Um, uh, the thing that you look at when you're seeing lists like this of old time baseball stars is that there is absolutely a total lack of creativity in coming up with nicknames in modern times.
Right.
Because you had players like Vic Lawyer Sorrell, who was not a lawyer, but they thought he was smart because he was the first pitcher in the major leagues. He's from Wake Forest and Wake County. First pitcher in the major leagues to wear glasses. And Specs Roberts the same way. They just picked something and named them like another famous North Carolinian who was involved in one of the great plays in baseball history, Whitey Lockman, who was on second base when Thompson hit the famous home run for the Pirates.
Right.
Bobby Thompson. The Giants win the pennant. I said the Pirates, but it's the Giants. But he was also a North Carolina native.
Right.
Just people who have been involved in things like that always fascinate me. And the fact that there are so many people out there with nicknames that you just don't know. General Crowder, who both played and managed in the major leagues for such a long time. You don't come up with that with, you can have Shohei Ohtani, but what's his nickname? Tell me the nicknames of Bryce Harper and the modern players who make headlines every day, but we don't have a handle just to tell them. I'm sure there are. I don't follow as much as I used to, but I need more nicknames in baseball.
Yeah, no, we don't. There's and that the nicknames are usually bestowed by sports writers,
Yes,
and I think that art is that art is been diminished.
it has also disappeared. Yes,
Yeah, and so I think that's part of it. But there were a lot of rubes. A lot of Southern boys coming off a farm were saddled with the nickname Rube.
there are 3 Rubes in the Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and one that I feature in the book is Rube Walker,
Right.
who was a pretty good backup catcher to Campanella, and was in fact catching that day when Thompson hit the home run.
Okay.
And if he was a very mild-mannered sort of guy, but if you want to rile him up, you bring up that day. Because he always claimed that it was supposed to be a pitch out. And Bronca just didn't get the ball far enough out. But he claimed he never called the pitch. That was called from the dugout. But Rube's important place in he became a pitching coach, and he was the pitching coach for the Mets during that time when they were blessed with those wonderful arms of Seaver, Koosman, Nolan Ryan, and Rube, having spent all his life behind the plate, knew what I soon learned is that all pitchers get hurt. They all get hurt. The ones that don't, the Gaylord Perrys, the Nolan Ryans, they are a very, very small number. And if they have any talent at all, they end up in the Hall of Fame just because of the longevity. But every one of them gets hurt. It's not a natural motion, and you do it over time and hard enough. You're gonna first it was shoulders, and then they realized that shoulder muscles could be strengthened with exercising, and then it became the ligaments in the elbow, which then Tommy John surgery took care of. But Rube knew that there was a expiration date on every arm, and it was unknown. In that case, you had to baby those arms. So he was the one who started. He never let no Rube pitcher ever came close to 300 innings pitched. None. He wouldn't have it. He wouldn't stand it. And guys like Seaver first buckled because he's a catcher. What does he know about pitching? But they soon realized that Yogi Berra, who was Met manager, once said, that Rube treats them like their sons, and they know he is extending their careers. So he put pitch counts. They were in his head, They were not advertised external pitch counts, but he was the first one who started who understood that these arms have to be coddled and babied and not overused. And so now we see that, of course, in the pitch counts, and you rarely do as a pitch and pitch. There used to be guys. Johnny Allen used to say he'd throw 200 pitches a game. So
But it was a strict pitch count of 200
yeah,
pitches per game.
right, yeah.
A strict pitch count.
But Rube understood that, and as a result, he took those Mets pitchers, to what they became, and so yeah, I think he deserves a special note of where he places in the whole scheme of things.
Need to move to North Carolina, within North Carolina, or away from North Carolina? Whether it's the Triangle, the Triad, or beyond, XL Moving and Storage is the company you can trust. Local, reliable, award-winning, and stress-free, XL's team handles every detail so you don't have to. Get your free quote today at xlms.com. That's EXCELMS.com. And tell them David Glenn sent you. Looking for the best food in Wrightsville Beach? Check out King Neptune Restaurant, owned by our friends Jimmy and Keaton Galeese. With fresh seafood, tasty steaks, creative cocktails, and the perfect beachside vibe, it's gotta be on your must-visit list. Whether you're grabbing a weekend lunch or brunch, enjoying dinner and drinks, or catching up with friends at the bar, King Neptune is the place to be. That's King Neptune Restaurant in Wrightsville Beach.
And you're watching or listening to This Was Then on the North Carolina Sports Network with Tim Peeler and Todd McGee, and we're joined by Frank TURSI tonight. And I want to put in another plug for his forthcoming book, The Tar Heel Boys of Summer, North Carolina's Major League Ball Players, that'll be published later this year by McFarland Book Publishers in the western part of North Carolina. And he also has a great blog, which is how I discovered him, the White Oak Journal. He writes about a lot of those players and some others that are not in the book on that blog. And I want to ask about one of those players. Moonlight Graham had the one game no at bat. Luke Stewart is a player who had, I believe he played in 3 games, only came to bat in 1 game, and in his first at bat hit an inside the park home run off a Hall of Famer. Was it Christy Matheson or Walter Johnson?
No, Walter Johnson.
Walter Johnson, okay. And so he became the first American League player to hit a home run in his first at bat. But because it was an inside the park home run, that feat went unnoticed for a long time. And so can you talk a little bit about how that all came to be?
Yeah, I mean, as you note, he came up against the big train, hit a home run that eluded the outfielders, the right fielder, long enough that it was a man on base, that both of them could score. And they even spelled his name wrong in the Washington Post. They misspelled Stewart. And so they got his name wrong. And no one records weren't, records weren't kept. It was in the early days of the sport. And so it was Cleveland Indians rookie who's in the Hall of Fame. I'd have to look it up, but it was he was credited with the first home run in his first at bat, and 40 years later, the Society for American Baseball Research, of which I'm a proud member for almost 20 years now, their researchers uncovered the Stewart homer, and then the Sporting News, which was baseball's Bible, put it in their record books, and then Major League Baseball followed suit. So it took 40 years before the accomplishment was recognized.
Frank, I'll go back and tell you a quick story, something that I loved just doing some research and talking to some North Carolina baseball players. On the day that Frank Jobe did the very first Tommy John surgery
Uh-huh.
to reconstruct an elbow, in the operating room next to him was Tarboro, North Carolina native Mike Caldwell, who was
Okay.
having a shoulder surgery at the same time,
Right.
1974, I believe it was. Unfortunately, Tommy John's surgery became very prominent and popular, but Mike Caldwell's surgery never did.
Right.
And so he does not have that to go with him, but he does have a great record as a great pitcher. One of the best who didn't make it to Hall of Fame status, but a great pitcher nonetheless through his time with the Padres, the Cardinals, and the Brewers.
Yep. Yep.
Well, Frank, we have taken up a lot of your time, and we do appreciate you joining us.
Sure.
And again, the name of the book is The Tar Heel Boys of Summer. It'll be coming out this fall, hopefully, if not early next year. We'll be looking for that. And anything else you want to add? Any other great story you want to share from your research before we let you go?
Yeah, I don't know. There
There's too many to choose on.
there are a lot of them. I will. There we had talked about, I think, before about brothers who played and we mentioned Rick and Wes Farrell, but there were the Wade brothers in Morehead City, Ben and Jake. Both were pitchers. Jake, they called him Whistling Jake because he liked to whistle, but it was more than just whistling, idle whistling. Jake would actually sit in front of a mirror and he'd start whistling arias, and his teammates thought he was a little bit off his rocker. He wasn't a very good pitcher. He was pretty wild. Well, he comes up against Johnny Allen, who another North Carolinian, grew up in the boys' home in the orphanage in Thomasville. Came up with the Yankees. Had a great early part of his career, but he was a terrible hothead, and then later on injuries sort of marginalized his career, but he won 19 in a row over 2 seasons, and he was getting ready to break the record held by Johnson and I forget who the other record holder was. It's 20 straight victories, and he comes up against the wild whistling man, Jake Wade, who walked 7 or 8 guys a game. Allen thought he had the game in the bag when he saw who he was going up against. He figured he was in the record books. Well, Jake goes out and pitches the game of his life. Pitches a shutout. Walks. They win only because of an error made behind Johnny Allen, and Johnny assaulted the third baseman who made the error in the dressing room after the game. That's the kind of guy he was. But he beat Johnny Allen 1-0, and denied Allen's place in the record books. And this was a guy who hadn't pitched a complete years. So it's stories like that, as they say, that's baseball. So
Now, Frank, I just want to make sure your book is coming out this fall, so it's not too late to, instead of calling it the Tar Heel Boys of Summer, to maybe go with the old nor state boys of summer, something like that. I mean, I only say that because of my current employment, but I just
Yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
ask.
We in fact wrestled with that. I wrestled with it because I certainly didn't want to leave the impression that this was a book about players who came from a particular school. But you know, the Tar Heel, the Tar Heel name predates the school nickname. So I went with history.
Well, we here on the Tar Heels Sports Network, as Mike used to know it as, at the North Carolina Sports Network, appreciate the fact that you are devoted to the historical nature of it all. And we appreciate you keeping alive the names that mean something here in the state of North Carolina.
Thank you, guys. I really did enjoy this.